Hey guys, I'm here to get into Inside Llewyn Davis, which is a Coen brother film that came out in the year 2013. And I think this instantly struck me as a masterpiece upon the first viewing. And I rewatched this a ton around the time frame when I was like 19, 20. This was kind of a life changing film for me because I think it's an excellent foreshadow to just how existentially lonely a lot of pursuing music really can be. And I think that honestly, I'm really thankful to be living in the time I am now, as opposed to like having this exact same ambition and actually like being in the early '60s, like, or 1961, which is what the film was set. You can really tell that there's like because nowadays we have like the internet, and I think the way you can build yourself like that is like it's like almost like you can almost find a way to easily. It's a lot easier to accept just being like something more like a minor celebrity for what your passion is, rather than like this big Bob Dylan. That's kind of the whole idea. This is almost like for every Bob Dylan, there's like 1,000 Bob Dylan guys who try to be that. And it's the same that goes for any genre, any kind of music. For every art platform where there's the one, there are thousands of other people out there trying, and they don't succeed at exactly getting at that point. And you kind of I don't know. I think this film is perfect at capturing a certain balance that's very warm and bleak at the exact same time. I think it's very subtle and just very lonely what this film is portraying. It just shows how, like they can, you can kind of study inside Llewyn, like literally Llewyn Davis is kind of like this hard-hearted kind of guy, and it's a little hard, but he's also very like I think being a creative type. Sometimes when you kind of get that hard, when you get stuck on the end of being harshly misunderstood, it can make you a little bit single-minded because you start to make it your life, and anything that doesn't involve it will not interest you whatsoever. Um, so that's again like you can kind of tell where he's had a lot of rocky relationships with people in his life too, because he like kind of does act so single-mindedly. So again, that's where a lot of me personally, it's like watch it wisely. Who you surround yourself with all the time, people who can accept and handle a person who's like that, in the first place, rather than just like expecting more out of it and then being disappointed later, which is kind of a lot of what you're witnessing in this film, which is just really poetic and beautiful. How this whole film unfolds, it's very poetic, and it's just very much like a week in the life of this character. Just all these situations that comes. A lot of it feels like really depressing. I always remember hearing this person come to me hating it because it wasn't funny at all, which is different from the Coen brothers typically. But this is the last Coen brothers masterpiece, I think. Because I think that they were, they literally are like the directors who have that ultimate kind of shade of like. Sometimes they're the most hilarious directors, Raising Arizona, Big Lebowski, and then sometimes they're the most serious directors. No Country for Old Men. And this really, this is a pretty serious film. The tone here is definitely kind of honestly. I know it sounds like I'm being punny, but really, it does kind of feel like a continuation of a lot of the formula that a serious man has to it. Um, it's where you know where he's coming from, but you also can see where it does make him kind of pretentious, and you really would almost be irritated by this, and if you were with him in real life. So I think it's just a very honest film that always comes back to me as timeless and important, because it really does kind of portray one of the best films I've ever seen of portraying a lonely artist's headspace, and literally where it's light and dark both at the exact same time, and it ultimately just ends up being very comfortable. Kind of ends up being so much better, more than just a typical study of like something of an angsty artist. Because art artists, it really does have angst to sort through. And sometimes the older you get, the more lame and pathetic the moods can feel in a lot of ways. So I think when you just kind of study all that, you figure out how to get a grip along the way. And that's the thing about music. And I know I've kind of sounded a little negative on my attitude towards a lot of that. It's not that I'm never going to stop playing. I think it'll come back. It's just like right now, I think I built so much music ambition back in 2021 and 2022 that I think the aware of it has really caught up to me. So it's like, wow. And now I think I'm going to approach it in a much more honest sense once the bug comes back, which it will inevitably. Not be too hyper ambitious about it, but just you just keep it small, literally. Don't get big ideas. That's a lot of this, but. He's a lonely musician, and there's so much sensitivity here. Oscar Isaac's just, this is his best moment right here. I remember being pretty great at Ex Machina also, which I'm in dire need to rewatch. But this and Inside Llewyn Davis is where he really shines as a very three-dimensional character. He is, I think, the most fleshed out character the Coens ever did, the deepest character perhaps in their entire filmography. Because most of the time, and this is no knock, this is just the Coens' outlook. I think they do have a slight they write some of the most fleshed out, deepest characters, but a lot of them do feel slightly animated in a certain kind of way. But somehow I think the Coens are masters at their best to bring it to reality. And I think whenever they kind of lose their touch a little, which the Coens do have their misfires, I think what happens is they get too far into screwball territory to the point where it does feel like a real life cartoon, and it just the aesthetic doesn't always add up. But when it's at its best, which is often about 6 or 7 times, they've been geniuses with their films. This is certainly one of them. You just really start to kind of just grasp that this is just like. out to portray something that's very human. And this is the most human it's ever been for the Coens. Like everyone has humanity. I mean, even people who seem like you want to frown upon them, but it's like, oh, well, wouldn't you do that too if you were up against Llewyn acting like this, particularly in this moment? It's almost like, for example, like F. Murray Abraham. That's when he's like criticizing his Llewyn Davis. And I love the kind of loose connection. Like he kind of plays that. I like that interesting contrast. And then another music film that actors in is Amadeus, where he's literally like just completely envious of Mozart. So this is kind of almost like another foundation of like, well, now he gets to kind of have his moment here with getting someone who doesn't think Llewyn Davis is that amazing of an artist. Which that's kind of the way you can go. Like part of being misunderstood is accepting a lot of people will not think you're a great artist, particularly like before a lot of breakthrough stuff was happening in the early '60s. I mean, I can imagine this was a hard time to break through in music. I think literally the world was waiting for a Bob Dylan to come around. And I think the film even kind of teases that this being something of like a foreshadow to like Bob Dylan kind of being the one who reigns in this kind of particular sort of story. Maybe Bob Dylan probably felt a lot like this during his earlier years even, But so there's a lot of thousands of other people who wanted to be on that platform. It's kind of the king of folk rock and evolving it to completely transcendent places. But and John Goodman's great in this too. I mean, he's like some incredible jazz musician who like he's just, it's funny because typically like he plays someone who feels very animated, but here it really does like a down to earth character who wants you to think that he's animated, like in a sense that otherwise he's just too much of a junkie, basically, I think is what it is. It's like he has this personality in front because, very, very like a heroin addict otherwise. So it's definitely like not a feel good movie, but it is comforting, I think, if you are something of an artist and aren't like, and I think technically speaking, if you're claiming this, and I think like you want to leave that impact. Like if you're expecting to like make it big time, like I think there's always going to be disappointment you're going to feel. So I like to, as the deeper I go, the more grounded I just want to kind of keep my expectations and literally just be satisfied, even if it like communicates to like the local kind of sense as opposed to just taking off big time. Although I'll keep pushing for that best of my ability. But hey, so does Llewyn Davis. I mean, this is like thousands of artists. Well, I different in film. Films like this too. Any art really. But there's just so much like careful pacing in this film, and the way the lighting presents all of this is just really genius. I don't know, it's very subtle, and it really does feel like the Coens were just onto something that instantly taps into your heart in a lot of ways more than anything. All the Justin Timberlake scenes are hilarious too. I love all that. Adam Driver, so funny. I don't know. This really just captures almost the dangers of being too much of a single-minded person. When you're obsessed with a certain art form, and usually it's because you don't feel completely satisfied with where you're at, with what you know best. So it can make you almost instinctually a little single-minded, but you start to see how stubborn that looks to the eyes of other people. And I think the more you kind of take that in, the more it makes you just want to chill out a lot more about those, places you haven't been fully, satisfied at just yet. Just let the moment kind of unfold and let it happen then, the best of your ability where you're meant to be. This is just a really relaxing kind of film. I mean, I think Roger Deakins, who does most Coen films, does not do this film. I believe it's the guy who did the cinematography for Amelie, which is I mean, this feels a lot like an Amelie, a lot bleaker kind of version of that film because that film's very warm. There's a warmth in this film, but it's a wildly subtle kind of warmth. And Oscar Isaac again is very unforgettable. I mean, I love the Coen brothers here, and it captures perfectly a New York City atmosphere in 1961. I think that's quite an interesting time, right before a lot of music was about to take off into big time. You could just tell there was a unique amount of pushing and, not enough people listening yet. So this had to be a really tough time to be a genius musician, which a lot of, that was coming out here. This feels very realistic. I really love all these scenarios, all these situations, all the cat symbolism, just kind of how, it just kind of goes down to it. We're all just a bunch of animals, he's different from a cat, it just seems like he always talks about how he just thinks he's tired, but it's something more. It's like he's always just spiritually in a really tired kind of place. And this is just what it is to be, I guess, in a melancholic tone, but it's also got something quite a little, subtly uplifting about it. And just like, it's okay to feel all of these emotions that are often hard to explain. It's a modern kind of loneliness that you can see. That I think that relates perfectly to a modern artist. The way it's told. Again, I think this is the last masterpiece the Coens have made at this point. I mean, we'll see. I mean, the tragedy of Macbeth was pretty great, but I haven't cared for too much like Hail. I should probably watch Hail Caesar eventually. I didn't really like Ballad of Buster Scruggs much, but inside, because I think this one's just got way too far into the cartoony, side of it. But it just seems like here it's just they really have like as much intense amount of humanism for loneliness here. It's just that's kind of when the Coens are at their best, honestly, at this point. Like they're just really wise. It's why like it feels like maybe perhaps the wisest film they made in a lot of ways. It's like again that balance of just like I care for this character, but yeah, he could also be irritating. He can kind of not. He's a little too cold. It's like and because he's a guy who dedicates his life to his music and his art, even if it doesn't get him to extremely famous places, he still keeps at it to the end. It's something pretty cool about it. So yeah, I recommend this one to anyone who's slightly interested in like the life of musicians, which I'm like, I think that's been ingrained in me from, that's as long as I can remember. I love studying the lives of musicians, just the amount of just depths of loneliness and contradictions they feel out throughout just, their unique platform of celebrity status in a lot of ways, and just how that comes out in their music and their art. Inside Llewyn Davis is a perfect masterpiece for any artist, I think. I think this is a perfect film to watch if you are any kind of artist. So, yeah, I recommend this one to anyone who's in such. Like, this could be boring to some. I could see this boring some people. So a lot of people might be looking for some of that more funny in the codes. And this isn't like No Country for Old Men intense. So, this is different from anything they've made, really. This isn't like Fargo or Bowski or none of that stuff. It's just its own thing entirely. It's most similar to Serious Man. It's most like an upgraded Serious Man in a sense. So, yeah. I'll go and say I recommend this mostly. I feel like most people would enjoy this film in a sense. So I couldn't imagine too many reasons not to. It's wildly entertaining. It's just really effortlessly easy to get into, I feel like. It's a wonderful tone this film conveys. So Inside Llewyn Davis. It's a special, original, one-of-a-kind sort of film.